I just feel like I need to give a trigger warning because some of these things are extremely disturbing, and these things have to do with children because DID is formed during childhood. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Lynn Margot, and today I'm talking about dissociative identity disorder because this is something that has been so stigmatized due to a harmful message that is being spread through YouTube or movies or just people talking about it and not knowing the facts. And this misinformation is extremely harmful to the individuals who have DID. So that's why I'm making this video. I'm trying to spread awareness and I'm trying to spread the actual information and the actual facts about this disorder. I will link all my sources and also some of the people in this community's videos and channels in the description box below if you're interested in learning more about this disorder. So DID is a coping mechanism that allows children who have had to experience extreme trauma to be able to move past and survive what they otherwise wouldn't have been able to move past. Dissociative identity disorder is a neurodevelopmental dissociative disorder. It was formerly known as multiple personality disorder, but was changed to dissociative identity disorder. DID is a disruption in identity characterized by two main aspects: disruption in identity and disruption in memory. DID develops due to repeated childhood trauma. When this occurs before a person's personality has fully integrated at around the ages 7 to 9, amnesic barriers form to protect the child from the awareness and the memory of the abuse. And this amnesia helps the person deal with the trauma. This is the mind's way of protecting itself and letting the child live a childhood as carefree and normal as possible. But this amnesia prevents the identity from fully forming a singular personality, creating multiple personalities with amnesic barriers between them. And these personalities are called alters. They help manage the life and holy memories regarding the abuse. A person with DID has a fragmented personality. The alters take control of the body at various times. And alter identities are sometimes misinterpreted as alter egos. And that's just not the same thing. An alter ego is a conscious change in personality. It does not involve amnesia. It does not involve trauma in any way. Alter egos are not caused by a mental disorder. Alters are alternate states of consciousness. They are formed due to severe childhood trauma and dissociating. And if a child's brain copes with trauma by creating alters, it is very possible that the brain keeps doing it as the child grows older. So DID is always formed during childhood, but alters can be created during the whole lifespan because that's just the way that person deals with trauma. Alters can have different ways of physically experiencing the world. They can have different senses, allergies, or voices. Some senses can be dulled or heightened, and alters can be of different ethnicities, species, genders. They can even be dead or alive. A child that is experiencing extreme trauma and thinks that it's not going to survive is going to want to separate themselves from that experience. That's why their subconscious minds create something that they think could survive that experience. A system is a group of alters inside one body. The alters have different roles in the system in order to keep the body well and functioning. The headspace or the inner world is a subconscious environment. Some alters are able to interact in the inner world, and the inner world can look really different depending on what type of child created it. Some have entire galaxies, while some just have a small house. It's what that child needed at the time of the trauma, and it is where alters are when they are not fronting. Fronting is when an alter takes charge of the body. Some people with DID compare this to switching drivers in a car. The car is the body and the driver is the alter. So you can switch driver, but you're still in the same car. Some types of alters contain no trauma, and they don't remember the trauma and can function well. These are called apparently normal parts and are usually the hosts. The host is the alter who is in the front most of the time. The host controls the body most often and usually lives a pretty normal life, not being aware of the abuse. And this is what DID is meant for. It is meant to keep the host unaware of the trauma and the abuse in order to have a normal life. Some other alters that are called emotional parts hold the trauma. They can be stuck in memories or times or years or experiences, reliving them again and again on loops, and they can sometimes be unaware of the passage of time. Some alters may have a different gender than that of the body, and this is usually due to sexual trauma. So, for example, if a male body is sexually abused, then a female alter can form because that child was forced to take on a female role in having sex with men, for example. Or a male alter can form in a female body because they might think that if they were a male and didn't have a vagina, for example, they couldn't have been raped. So it's like they're thinking that this is happening to me because I'm me, and if I were someone else than me, this wouldn't be happening to me. So a girl that is sexually abused might think subconsciously that this wouldn't happen if I was a boy, and therefore a male alter forms. Child alters, that are often nicknamed littles, are a very common type of alter. Several child alters usually exist within a person with DID, and they are often found to hold the childhood trauma, and they usually stay the age that the person was when the trauma happened. Some might have the speech or appearance of a child, and some might not be able to read, speak, or write. Some alters may be disabled, though the body is not. For example, an alter could be blind or mute due to the abuser saying things like "don't talk" or "you didn't see anything." Non-human alters form due to prolonged or severe interpersonal trauma that makes the child think that they are no longer human. Non-human alters represent what the trauma did to the child. If a child's mind resorts to creating an alter due to trauma, the alters may revolve around things that are familiar to the child, like animals or mythical creatures or mermaids or monsters or demons or angels or robots, things like that. They are what the child needed at the time of the trauma, and a reason for creating these things might be that the child thinks that a mythical creature is strong and powerful, and a mythical creature would never have been through what they are being through, or that a mythical creature like a dragon or a mermaid could survive this. They cannot. Or, something like a fairy could just fly away and escape the situation. An animal alter could form due to a child not feeling like they're being treated as a human. If a child feels like it's being treated as an animal, or feels like a human couldn't possibly survive what they are going through, an animal alter could form. It could be things like being abandoned or neglected, locked in cages, being put on leashes, having to eat out of dog bowls, having to eat unpleasant things or being starved, having to do humiliating things, having to obey your abuser, or having to stay loyal and not being able to escape your abuser, having to walk on all fours, not being allowed to speak. Dead or ghost alters are alters who contain trauma due to a near-death experience. They are sometimes stuck in a loop or a traumatic event, not even knowing that they're still alive or that they are an alter. And the alters can be trapped in a traumatic memory for some time, which is usually the memory or experience where they felt like they were dying. Dissociating is what allows a person to disconnect themselves and their conscious minds from what's happening. It is a central defense against an overwhelming experience. Dissociation is a psychological escape where an actual escape isn't possible. Most people dissociate at some times. It could otherwise be referred to as zoning out, or feeling like your body is doing things that you're not doing. For example, if you're driving a car and you just stare at the road and you kind of zone out, you're kind of not really there, you're not focusing, you're thinking about other things, but your body is still doing the things it's used to doing, and you're still driving the car because of muscle memory. You're not really aware of what's going on, but your subconscious is still in control. It is a very common thing to dissociate when experiencing a traumatic event, like sexual assault or being abused in some way, to feel like you're in a dream or like time is slowing down. Trauma is a response to a deeply distressing or disturbing event that overwhelms the body's natural coping mechanism, causing feelings of helplessness, a diminished sense of self, and an inability to fully feel emotions and experiences. Common causes of trauma could be injuries or illnesses, invasive medical procedures, childhood neglect or abandonment, childhood abuse, whether it's physical, psychological, emotional, or sexual, war, and accidents. The brain processes trauma in the subconscious. It affects how the brain develops and how it processes memories. And DID is actually an extreme form of CPTSD, or complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Humans are social creatures that are designed to support and rely on each other. The eldest and strongest take care of the youngest and weakest. This is the way we've always been. It's the way we've survived, and it's instilled deep into our brains to trust each other and depend on each other. And because of this, children have no neurological adaptations to see their caregivers as anything but good. And this is why a child has to internalize its trauma. Because they are unable to see their caregivers as bad, they have to turn that inwards. They're bad. They're not deserving of love. They deserve what's happening to them. Their caregivers and their abusers are right. And this is their fault. This is the natural way the brain processes and tries to understand trauma. It is never your fault that you've had to go through any kind of trauma, but the brain thinks it is. Because it's easier to blame yourself than to realize the extent of the actual situation. Flashbacks are one of the most common ways that traumatic memories resurface. A flashback is usually caused by a trigger, and a trigger can be anything from a sense to a smell or a location or a feeling or being touched. During a flashback, there will often be an overwhelming visual and a sense of being thrown back into the situation that you've escaped. It's essentially reliving a traumatic memory. Some common misconceptions about DID is if it's even real. If people with DID are violent, that it is very rare, that it can develop in adults, that people around you would have noticed that people with DID are crazy, or that people with DID have no control, are aggressive, or unpredictable. But it is actually less likely that a person with DID is dangerous to you than a person without DID being dangerous to you. Because a person that has been severely abused in the past is more likely to fall back into the role of being abused rather than ever being the actual abuser. So people with DID are not people to be scared of. And it's believed that around 3% of the population have DID. So it's actually more common than having green eyes. And that's just really upsetting to me, because that means that 3% of the population, at least, have been subjected to these horrible, traumatic events in their childhoods, which is just so disturbing. So how do you know if you have DID? Alters sometimes have no idea that the other alters exist. And a person with DID doesn't always know that they have DID. They might not know that they've suffered trauma in the childhood, but some people might experience blackouts or memory loss, or feel like they are being possessed. But DID is not a possession, It is a recognized mental health disorder. There is no original personality because an original personality was never allowed to be formed in the first place, which is why all the alters feel entitled to the body, and which is why alters cannot be removed or killed. They are simply a part of that person's brain. So some of the symptoms that you might have dissociative identity disorder may include memory loss of certain time periods, events, people, and personal information, a sense of being detached from yourself and your emotions, a perception of people and things around you as distorted or unreal, a blurred sense of identity, mental health problems such as depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts, emotional numbing, flashbacks, hearing voices, interruptions in your awareness. Severe dissociation is a symptom of DID, but normal dissociation is not. A sense of alienation and distance from those around them. An inability or unwillingness to connect with other people on an emotional level. Feeling an internal conflict of who you are. A shift in identity accompanied by changes in behavior. Psychotherapy and trauma therapy can be effective ways of dealing with DID, but having DID doesn't mean that there is something wrong with you or something that has to be fixed. It is simply the way that you coped with trauma in the past. There's nothing wrong with you. It is a natural way that the body and mind copes with things that nobody should have to go through. All disorders have to be diagnosed by a professional, and if you think that you might have DID, I would suggest calling a psychologist or a doctor. And I hope that this video was informational and educational. And if you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe. It's free and it makes me happy. So yeah, let's become friends, and I will see you in my next video. Yeah, ha det! Hold on, get through, you'll make it out okay. Fight for what you are. Ellie? Ellie, vad gör Ellie? Vad gör Ellie? Ha? Vad gör Ellie? Jag vet inte.